Hello friends, I'm going to be showing you how to make this really cool flexible ant robotic, and let me show you how it works and then we'll get started on putting it together. For this project you will need the kit from Steam Code to make the flexible ant. You will also need 3 AAA batteries, a small Phillips head screwdriver, and it's helpful if you also have on hand some electrical tape and a pair of scissors. The first step is to open your kit, and inside you'll find several smaller bags and the battery box. So take out all the small bags. You'll see one that has wooden pieces in it. You'll see one that has some gears and some plastic pieces in it. And you'll see another bag that has wires and some additional screws and plastic nuts in it. The first bag that you're going to need looks like this. So go ahead and open that bag and sort out all your products. This is what is referred to as the gearbox. It has 2 parts, a top and a bottom. Then you'll also see a motor. You can set the motor aside, you won't need that till later. You will need 1 long axle, a medium-sized axle, and a small axle. And you will also need all 3 gears, and 3 screws, you can set these pieces aside for later. Okay, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to find the gearbox that says Steam on it. Set it flat down on the table and find the smallest gear. It looks like this. And find the smallest axle. Put the small axle in the top right-hand hole, and then on top of that axle, place the smallest gear. Next, take the longest axle and find the gear that looks like this. It has 2 sides. One side is smooth, one side has rivets on it. Not this one. It only has one side that's smooth. So you want the longest axle and the gear that has 2 sides to it. I'm going to push it down. Until the gear is midway through the axle. You can see that there is a smooth side and a side with gears on it. With the smooth side going down and the gear side up, you will now place the axle in the hole labeled F. It should line right up with that other gear so that when you turn the top gear, the bottom gear should turn also. The next step is to put the medium size axle on the remaining gear. And again, you want to push it down until it's about midway down the axle. Lift up your gearbox. We're going to just gently lay it in there so that the gears line up to each other. When you turn the larger axle, you should see that all the other axles are turning. The next step is to take the other side of the gearbox, find the holes that match up with the axles, and slide the top gearbox over the axles. They should fit nicely together, and you can line up the sides so that you have one complete gearbox. While holding the top and the bottom together, turn over the gearbox. Next, you're going to add the screws one screw is going to go above the letter S. Another screw is going to go at the very bottom. And the third screw is going to go to the far left. Inside of your bag, you should also find that there's another bag identical to the one you just put together. Here it is. You're going to repeat the same process to make a second gearbox. So if you need to, go back in the video a little bit to review the instructions and put together a second gearbox. Now we have two gearboxes assembled. They should look exactly the same. So compare them and make sure they look the same. You can push those over to the side for just a minute, and then you're going to look for two other bags from Steam Code. One has a bunch of wooden pieces in it. Go ahead and open that bag. Take out the wooden pieces. You can set the wheels aside for a few minutes and find the two rectangular pieces that have 4 holes drilled into them. Take a look at your wooden pieces that are rectangular. You will see that on one side there's a set of holes that are very close to the edge, and on the other side they're a little farther away from the edge. Line up the two pieces so that the holes that are close to the edge are close to each other. Then open up this little bag that has some plastic nuts and wires in it. You can set the wires beside your battery box. Take out the plastic nuts and set them aside. Should also find a piece of foam. You can set that aside and carefully empty out the metal screws and nuts. You will want to find 4 screws, 4 metal screws, and 4 metal nuts. The other screws and nuts can be set aside for now. We're going to start on the left side. Place the gearbox on top of the rectangular piece of wood so that the openings line up. Slip one screw from the side that has the gearbox through the hole. And on the other side, you'll want to screw on the nut. Do the same thing on the bottom. Slip the screw in through the hole. Turn it over and screw on the nut. After you have the nuts loosely attached to the screws, turn your plate back over and use the screwdriver to tighten everything up. You will need to hold the nuts in place on the back of the rectangular plate. So there, we have the gearbox attached to one of the rectangular plates. Go ahead and repeat the same process, but this time you're going to be attaching it to the other plate. So now we have 2 rectangular plates with gears attached. You can set these rectangular plates and the Steam Code plate, which will be attached to the middle. You can set this all aside for now. The next thing you want to do is you want to find the 4 wheels and also the plastic cranks. There are 4 of those. You'll need 8 screws, and you will need 8 plastic nuts. The plastic nuts come attached to each other, so you'll need to take a few minutes to remove the plastic nuts. Simply twist them and pull them off. So we have our 4 wheels, our 4 plastic cranks, 8 metal screws, and 8 plastic nuts. You will just need 1 wheel at a time, so you can set the rest aside. You will need 1 crank, 2 screws, and 2 nuts. And this process is going to be repeated for all 4 wheels. Take the plastic crank and line up the center of the plastic crank in the center of the wheel so that you can see through the holes. So the pre-drilled holes in the wooden wheel and the drilled holes in the plastic crank line up. It really doesn't matter where you put the screws. It's more important that the center of the plastic crank lines up with the opening in the center of the wheel. So you can put the screw on one side and another screw on the other side in any of the holes that line up best. So go ahead and take one screw and place it through the plastic crank all the way through the wood. On the other side, add the plastic nut. Attach it loosely, and then add a screw and a plastic nut to the other side. Again, it doesn't matter where you put it, just make sure the holes line up. After you have them attached loosely, use your screwdriver, hold one side where the plastic nut is, and use the screwdriver to tightly attach the screw. Do this on both sides. So that now you have a wheel that has a place for the axle to be inserted. Please do this for all 4 wheels. Repeat the same process. If you need to, go back and watch the instructions again for this part of the project. Okay, so now you should have 4 wheels, and each wheel should have a plastic crank attached to the middle. It should look like this on one side and this on the other side. It's important that the center portion where the axle will be inserted is in the center of the wheel. You can set these 4 wheels aside. Next, we're going to get out those gearboxes again that are attached to the rectangular plates. You will also need the little piece that says Steam Code on it. You will need 4 more screws and 4 plastic nuts. We are going to attach this center plate to the 2 rectangular pieces so that they make one continuous piece. You're going to do that by simply slipping the screws through the holes and attaching the plastic nut on the other side. Use the screwdriver to tighten it up. You're also going to add one to the top, again securing it with the nut on the other side and firmly screwing it in with your screwdriver. You'll see that the top portion can be slid back and forth, and this will give you flexibility later when you're making your flexible ant. Do the same thing with the other side. It gets a little tricky, so if you have a friend or a parent that can hold the other side and give you a hand, that would be wonderful, because it gets a little tricky after a while to hold all these pieces together. So now I'm screwing the other piece on. Once you have it all attached, it should look like this. The next step is to find this piece that looks like a T. It's referred to as the center of gravity offset plate. So find that. You'll also need 2 more screws and 2 more nuts. You are going to be attaching the center of gravity offset plate to the piece that says Steam Code. Simply lay it on top and line up the holes so that the bottom hole and the top hole are lined up with the pre-drilled holes on the plate that says Steam Code. Add your screws, add the metal nuts, and tighten with your screwdriver. Okay, so now I have the whole body plate put together. I have a gearbox, a rectangular plate, I have the Steam Code center plate, I have the stabilizing piece that looks like a T, and then the same thing on the other side, a rectangular piece, and the gearbox on the opposite side. Notice that these gearboxes are placed oppositely so that we have the clip for one of the motors at the top, and on the other side, on the right side, the clip for the other motor is on the bottom. Also notice that the axles are lined up so that they're about center. So we have equal amounts sticking out on the top and the bottom on each side. The next step is to find your wheels. And you are going to be adding the wheels to that larger axle that's sticking out. So place one on one side and one wheel on the other side, and then push them together. It might be helpful to put them down on the counter and push down so that you feel that they are attached firmly. Then repeat the same thing on the other side. One wheel on the top, one wheel on the bottom. Push them so they're firmly attached. You can, again, even push them down on a hard surface. So now we have wheels on both sides. We have a set of wheels on one end and a set of wheels on the other end. You can set aside this body, the ant's body, and find the two motors and the two worm gears. Now you will notice, if you look very carefully at the worm gears, there is a smooth side that has a rectangle on it. And there's a side that does not have a rectangle on it. The smooth side with the rectangle on it needs to face away from the gear. So smooth side pointing this direction and slip it onto the gear. These are hard to put on. After you get it started, push it down on a firm surface. Repeat it with the other side. Again, find the tiny rectangle. Make sure that is pointed away from the gear. Get it started by pushing it on to the end of the gearbox, or the end of the gear, and against a flat surface, push down firmly. Next, please find two sets of wires, a set of red wires and a set of black wires. Notice the contact points. Push them up slightly and gently. It is very helpful at this stage to make sure you have enough exposed wire. If you feel there's not enough wire exposed, you can use a pair of scissors to gently trim the insulation off the wire, but be very careful because it's very easy to accidentally trim the wires themselves. So to do that, you want to use a pair of scissors and press down very, very, very gently on the insulation and sort of turn it between your fingers. Now there's a slight indentation where I use my scissors. Now I'm going to use my fingernails to gently pull the insulation off. I'm going to do that for both sides of both black wires and both red wires so that I have enough exposed wire for the project. Now I have the two gears lined up side by side, and I'm going to attach these wires. It's very important that you attach the wires oppositely. If you attach them in the same way, then your wheels will go opposite directions. So we need to attach them oppositely so they go in the same direction. Take the black wire and slip it through the tiny little hole on the motor, the top hole. Press it together and be certain that the wires are firmly attached. Then on the bottom, carefully slip the red wire through the opening of the contact point. Pinch the wires together so they're firmly attached to the contact. Take the second motor, and remember, you need to do this oppositely as the other one. So now you're going to take the red wire and attach it to the top contact point of the motor. And then take the black wire and attach it to the bottom. So we have one motor that has black at the top and red at the bottom, and the other motor that has red at the top and black at the bottom. Now we're going to put the motors on the gearboxes. So here we have one of the motors, and it really doesn't matter which motor you use. And we're going to slip it into the opening and keep pushing till it snaps in place. Do the same thing with the other side. Again, making sure that the oppositely colored wire is facing up. So on the right side, I have the black wire at the top and the red wire at the bottom. On the left side, I have the red wire at the top and the black wire at the bottom. Okay, the next step is to find the little piece of foam and peel off the backing off the adhesive. You're going to put it on the piece that looks like a T. And again, peel off the adhesive off the top. And now we are going to add the battery box. And you want to add the battery box so that the wires are pointing inward. Again, if you would like, you can cut off some of the insulation to expose more of the wire, which I'm going to do. At this point, you can add the batteries, but first you want to pull up the switch so that you don't turn the batteries on. Continue to leave the switch open so that you don't engage the electricity. Find all of the same colored wires. I'm going to start with the red wires and put all the exposed wires together and twist them together. Do the same thing with the black wires. Find the 3 black wires. Put the exposed wires together and twist them together. At this point, you will want to hold your ant very carefully so that your hand is not touching any of the wheels. And with the other hand, engage the electricity by pushing the switch down. You want to make sure all the contact points are together and that you have everything wired properly. If you do, everything should turn, the wheels should turn, and also you should notice that the wheels should be turning in the same direction. The next step is totally optional if you wish. You can take some electrical tape, small pieces of electrical tape, and you can cover the exposed wires. This will prevent the wires from slipping apart. Also, if you want to keep the wires out of the way, you can sort of attach the wires to each other like this. Okay, so now your flexible ant should be put together. The next step is to, with it being off, the switch being off, you can push the sides together so that it's angled. And you can put it on the floor and watch it go. Have tons of fun. You can decorate your ant to make it look more like an ant, or you can leave it like it is. You can change the angles and see how it changes the movement of the ant. Have fun, experiment, set up your own experiments, maybe race with a friend and see what you can do.